Hello, welcome. This is the first ever Spittoon Arts Collective podcast, episode 1. It is my great pleasure to introduce Simon Shieh today. He is the co-founder of the Spittoon Literary Magazine, an all-round Spittoon elder, right from when Spittoon started in 2015. It's a great pleasure to have you here, Simon. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Excellent. So, where are you right now? Can you tell us just what your situation is? Where are you calling from and why?
So I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. I've just finished a long day of teaching my ninth and 10th graders at the high school that I'm teaching at right now. And I moved to D.C. about 6 months ago now from Beijing. I came straight from Beijing to DC, and we really like it here. You know, it's no Beijing. Everybody's a little bit more uptight here. So I miss that kind of, that easygoing vibe of Beijing, how we used to be able to just put on events, a week in advance and call a bar and say, hey, we're bringing a bunch of poets by. Can you, let us in? But no, DC is really cool. It's a cool place to be. But yeah, I definitely miss Beijing. I'm sure you do too.
I certainly do, yeah, of course. I've been away for just over a year and a half now. Um, but it's a place that haunts you once you leave it, right? Um, so I was just going to ask you as well, how long were you in Beijing prior to leaving? Could you tell us a little bit? Because what I'm going to do in a moment, I'm going to embarrass you by reading your official bio from your website, just to give everybody some grounding and context about who you are. But I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth first. If you could just, tell us about how long you were in Beijing, why you were there, what you got up to, just the first thing that comes into your head.
Yeah, so I came to Beijing originally in 2007 or 2006, 6 or 7, because my family moved there because my mom is a U.S. diplomat. So she brought us to Beijing because she was being posted there. And at the time I was in ninth grade. So I did high school in Beijing. And then I took a gap year after high school. And I did it in Beijing. I stayed in Beijing. So I really liked Beijing, obviously. And then after my gap year, I came back to the US to do university, and then I found my way back to Beijing on a Princeton and Asia Fellowship to teach at China Foreign Affairs University. I was teaching English there. And then after graduating college, I was like, I don't want to go back to Beijing because, I lived there for 5 years already in high school. I want to go somewhere else. I want to have new adventures and all that. But I found myself back in Beijing nonetheless. And then when I got there after I graduated college, I felt like I had kind of come home. And that kind of surprised me because I always thought of Beijing as, I guess when I left Beijing in high school, I was very ready to leave. The pollution was kind of getting me down. They had just recently started censoring the internet. So stuff like that kind of made me a little bit sour on Beijing. But I got back in 2015 after I graduated college, and yeah, I really felt like I had come home. So I stayed there after my Princeton and Asia Fellowship finished, which was 2017. And then I started, by then I'd already met Matt, right? Matt was doing Spittoon when I got there, and he was holding kind of informal readings around town, especially at Matto Bar. And so I talked to Matt, and we quickly became friends, right? And then Matt pitched the idea of starting a magazine, and so I was like, I want in on this magazine. That sounds really cool. And so Spittoon Literary Magazine was born, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, so after I finished teaching at China Foreign Affairs University, I started working on a teenage youth lit mag, kind of like Spittoon, but not really like Spittoon because it was more focused on teenagers and education. And I would go to schools and do poetry workshops and this and that. Um, and that was really fun. I did that for a few years, and then I started teaching at an international school, and then I left. Now I'm back in the U.S. So right from the horse's mouth.
So, just to kind of like take a step back here, I've just spoken to Simon, who's introduced himself, and we were just about to begin to look at, various projects he was involved in Beijing. But I'm going to do a little segue here now, Shelley, just to introduce you as well, and then we'll go back to where we were. So, Shelley, I've had the pleasure of meeting you before in Beijing for the launch of issue 5 of the Spittoon Literary Magazine. Maybe as a kind of way in to kind of introducing yourself, can you tell us how you heard about the Spittoon Literary Magazine and generally about your interest in poetry? What's brought you to where you are now?
Okay, two big questions. So basically, I picked up the issue, I think it was issue 2, the one with the yellow cover, when I was in Beijing, on a separate trip. And yeah, it was such a pleasure to find what I thought was like a very well, yeah, like just a very well curated and a kind of a new style of literature, like a literary publication that I wasn't previously accustomed to in China, especially in a Chinese bookstore. And yeah, I was really drawn to it, and I was really pleasantly entertained and interrogated and curious about the work inside, and by the people who had made it, which was you guys. And so it was, yeah, it was a real elucidation of the Anglophone literary scene in China for me. So it was such a pleasure. And then, yeah, and then I think I reached out, right? And then I wanting to get involved, I think. And then, and yeah, and Simon was so lovely to welcome me into the team. And yeah, because when I see something, maybe this is actually like I want to I when I see something that I want to participate in, I want it to be always a reaching outwards. Just because it's like, as an immigrant and like, being so familiar with the English language literary canon and having it being indoctrinated in that realm, I thought that there were so many areas of vacancies, which I thought the Chinese language literature was fit to fill, amongst other global literatures, of course. And so when I started, like when I had the impetus to contribute, I really wanted it to, really grow, like be big, like be global, and have other people, like whether they were a little bit familiar with like Chinese language literature as I was, or not familiar at all. I really wanted to be a part of that introductory process, and so that people could see how vast and rich and like, yeah, and and multiple and various Chinese language literature was. So it was such an honor to be able to join the team and to be participating in that endeavor. Yeah, so I've been writing poetry since I was a teenager. Such a classic story, and it was, yeah, it's the Bildungsroman of hell. But
Sounds like a good band name,
yeah, you can have it.
like a metal band.
Yeah. And no, and yeah, and poetry for me has always been expansive. It's expansive with language, it's expansive with idea, and it's expansive with the self. It allows the self to trespass into like otherworldly and unimaginable realms of thinking. And it's, yeah, and I think it participates with the world in this very unique way. So that's why I've, against all odds, kept doing it.
Can I tell a story about how Shelley met Spittoon? So, okay, well, or how Spittoon met Shelley. So Shelley sent Spittoon, me, some of her poems to be included in the magazine. I don't know if you remember this, Shelley. Sorry if this is embarrassing for you.
No, no, no. I actually don't, but this is good.
I read the poems and they were incredible because Shelley's an incredible poet. But at the time she sent the poems was like at the exact time that we started to think about the magazine as more of a platform for translation. So I had to email Shelley and say, "Hey, these are incredible poems, but we're not publishing original English language poems anymore, so we can't publish your poems, unfortunately." So the first time I interacted with Shelley, it was to reject her beautiful poetry. But I included in that email that because she was so talented and I saw that she was, Chinese Canadian, I said, "Hey, do you want to work with us on Spittoon?" Because at the time we were looking for people exactly like Shelley who were bilingual and who were excellent writers. So I reached out to her, and lucky for us, she said, "Yeah, let's do it." So Shelley started kind of helping us with translations, and she was like, very good at organizing and stuff like that. So she helped us kind of organize. Basically, she kind of started by dipping her toes in, and then very quickly I was like, okay, this person needs to be the editor in chief because she's got it all. So that's from my point of view how how Shelley got involved. But I think it's a pretty funny story.
Yeah, I colonized my rejection. I totally forgot about that. Now I'm hurt. What poems are they? I'm gonna publish them in the next issue.
Do it. You can do that now.
So like, I remember when I first heard about you, Shelley. As Simon mentioned, it was a kind of an interaction that grew and grew. And I've noticed from issue 5 to issue 7 now that the artwork, the layout, the content, the direction has definitely changed and evolved. But if I take a step back prior to that, just to bring it to Simon as well, the entire evolution of the magazine has been a compelling one because, as you mentioned originally, Shelley, it was an English language magazine in Beijing. But then, Simon, I'm just going to ask you because we'll talk about the linear evolution of the magazine. I'll ask you what your actions were, and the situation was probably around about, I think, issue 3, where the ethos of the magazine changed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt and I were just talking about the magazine and where it was headed, and we were really excited about the magazine because it had kind of gotten so much interest and attention early on from the Beijing expat community, especially. And that was really inspiring and heartening for us. But we were kind of talking about some of the challenges we might face down the road, and I think the biggest challenge was getting new material, getting new submissions. At the time, we were relying mostly on writing from other kind of expats in Beijing or English language writers based in China. And I think Matt and I both understood that that pool was a kind of limited, finite pool, and that we would either have to expand our reach to other to Anglophone or English language writing from other countries, or we would have to kind of rethink what we were doing. And there's just so much. All of us being poets know that there's so many publications dedicated to publishing original English language poetry and fiction and nonfiction around the world, especially in the U.S., Canada, UK, Australia, that we weren't sure, I guess, that we wanted Spittoon to just be another one of those publications. I think we felt like we were uniquely positioned to do something different. And so that's when we kind of pivoted and made the decision to focus more on poetry, fiction, nonfiction in translation. And we had been doing that before, in previous issues, especially with Zheng Xiaoqiong, who's now become a very, very well-known poet in the West. But yeah, I think we decided to kind of make the whole magazine's ethos about showing the West what contemporary Chinese writers are doing, and contemporary Chinese artists. And ever since issue 4, that's been the focus of the magazine. And I think that it's just been really wonderful to see the magazine grow into that identity, and bringing Shelly on and bringing Sophie on, who's the co-editor in chief with Shelly, really has been a great thing for the magazine in that sense. But yeah.
Excellent answer. Shelley, what's it like organizing an entire literary magazine from afar, as you've been doing? Because you were living in Japan, I believe, during the sort of like the main era of that collaboration. Can you tell us what it was like? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Were there benefits or drawbacks?
Well, when I was in Japan, the time difference was definitely easier. And yeah, it's really difficult, to like get the logistics of publishing a magazine in place. And I really, really relied a lot on Simon when he was in Beijing still, and I rely a lot on to this day on Sophie, who is just so wonderful, and she has such tremendous energy for this work, and she has such an intelligent pulse on what's happening in contemporary Chinese letters. And I think if it wasn't for her, she is actually like so much more than me. She has a huge stake in the magazine's identity, because she is actually the main person that picks out the Chinese language writers that we eventually translate. So actually, I kind of, for me, the work is very much about um, it's not easy. It's not hard to do it from afar, because my work it's not so much about networking, or like, it's not so much about getting to know the literature like Sophie's job is. And I think for that, you really, really do have to be in China, and you have to be in Beijing, and you have to participate very actively in the literary scene, and you have to know people and understand how the machine works over there, as opposed to how the machine works in the Western world. So she's the one. She's the one.
Yeah, she knows a lot of the writers personally or through WeChat that we publish. So she'll tell, and she's in a lot of WeChat groups with these writers. So she'll be like, "Hey, so and so, posted a link to Spittoon, and said this and that about it," or like, so and so is really easy to work with, or so and so is really difficult to work with. So we have to like approach them carefully. And she just knows all the writers, in and out. So she's a huge resource.
Sorry, just very briefly summarize. This is the current team, isn't it? You've got Shelly, you've got Simon. You also have our Chinese editor-in-chief, Zuo Fei, or Sophie. That's the sort of core organizing team. Sorry, Shelly, what were you going to say there? Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, she is the lifeline of the Chinese language section of the magazine, and she makes it really easy for the rest of us to follow that line.
So could you tell us a little bit about the process then, or?
Yeah, Simon, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say that for me, there's like two kind of main parts to the magazine's machinery, and the first part is finding the authors to publish, and the second part is translating them into English. And they're equally difficult, and they require very different skill sets. And I think that having two editors at the helm really helps to that end, because it's hard for two people to be really good at both of those things. So anyway, but maybe Shelly, you can speak more to the current machinery of the editorial process.
So essentially, when we start planning an issue, Sophie and we run through submissions first. Sometimes you get submissions. And then we also run through like the past authors that we had wanted to publish in previous issues but weren't able to have the space or the money for. And so we look at those authors in a fresh light, and we look at that writing, and we read through the Chinese language literature together. And Sophie is usually the one who kind of there's no thematic alignment to the magazine, right? Like we don't operate based on anything except that it has to be literature and it has to be Chinese. So before, when like Spittoon was such a community publication, and I mean it still is like such a community publication, I think, and Spittoon is such an amazing and voracious and curious community, and that I think a lot of our energy and a lot of our inspiration comes from the people who are also working alongside us as writers or artists or musicians or whatever, however. But so I think in previous issues, we had a fair bit of contribution from the community, like either by I think in issue 5 we had Poetic Refractions, which was a project that Jennifer Fossenbell, one of our translators, organized, and she had like local artists within the Spittoon community like reflect on some of the Chinese language poems, not as translations because these people weren't translators; they were just vibing with the piece. So we had projects like that in the past. In this last issue, it has been so much about the literature, so much about the text, which I think is also, one of, yeah, I mean, it's my area of, I don't know, I can't say expertise. It's my chosen devotion. I worship at the altar of the text. So, um, and in that process, Sophie like got a bunch of Chinese language submissions together from like a lot of different exciting authors writing at the time who were either up and comers, debut authors who had just gotten books out and were winning new awards, or like long established authors who had new work out. And so we read through those, and then we finalize those selections, and then we pair them with translators, and which is always a very tricky. It's just always tricky. I feel like I can never get it right, guys. I can never get it right. But
it's an art.
Yeah, but we do our best. I've always felt that if translators were allowed too much choice. And this is a very specific arena, but a lot of translators start translating out of passion. They read something in a certain language and they're like, this needs to be in English. Like the English language audience needs to be introduced to this. And I think that's beautiful, and I think that's very good. But I also think that translation is it's an art, and it's a craft, and it's also it's a skill. It has to be honed, and I think by sometimes surprising translators with the text that we ask them to translate, it allows them to evolve with the art, and it also allows them to put their own to dialogue with the text in a different way. And I think it's like, I mean, sorry if I'm getting off track. Feel free to interrupt me whenever, but I feel like a lot of the work that Spittoon does that I think is so important is creating new translators. Like a lot of our translators, especially when we started working with Duke University, which was, I think, something that Simon started, right?
Yeah, issue 5.
Yeah, and we were working with Austin Warner, who was teaching translation there, and we had his students. And so we were raising translators who were speaking Chinese as an original language. And so much of the problem I personally find with Chinese language in English translation is that it's a lot of English language translators who learn Chinese later in life, and then they do their work, which is totally which is amazing, and I'm in awe of those translators. But I think it's so important to have this to have this innate connection to the language as well when you're translating. And because Chinese is my first language, I find my relationship with it and I find my sensibilities when I'm translating is it's so guided by intuition, like feeling and emotion, as opposed to like picking words and sliding them into boxes, which is not at all what translators do. But I think it's like adding that emotionality and that preternatural connection that you have to language would add so much, would widen the spectrum of Chinese language translation that we have out there. So that's why I think it's like pairing translators with translation with text is a it's a real game, and it requires real finesse, but it sometimes just also require a little bit of recklessness. You know,
I want to ask Shelly in a minute how she does it, how she pairs uh, writing with its translator, because I really do think that that's an art in itself. But just to give some context, we work with different translators, right? Some of the translators, like Shelly said, we kind of are like baby translators that we raise, right? And but those are mostly the students from Duke Kunshan. So Duke University is a campus in Kunshan, which is in kind of middle southern China. And so we went down there, and we know a professor down there who is himself a really good translator from Chinese to English, and Austin Warner. And we said, hey, do your students want to get involved with this project? We think it's a great opportunity for them to translate, because for us, we're working with Chinese writers mostly who have not been translated into English yet, right? So our goal is to show the West new Chinese writers. So we're kind of starting from a Chinese text, and we have to bring the Chinese into English ourselves. So that's yeah. Finding translators has always been a challenge, which is why we wanted to connect with Duke Kunshan and get their students involved, so that we had this kind of um, this pool of translators who would always be there. And those students are mostly kind of studying Chinese, learning Chinese. Some of them are American, but a lot of them are Chinese nationals. A lot of them were born and raised in China. So what we were able to do there is pair the non-native speakers, or I should say non-native Chinese speakers, with the native Chinese speakers. And that kind of made for a really beautiful translation team, because they're working together. They both have, their own distinct strengths in the translation process. And so it's called a two-step translation process when you have a native speaker and the target language translator. So that's one way we translate our content into English. We also work with translators who are just looking for stuff to translate, and whose kind of translation ability we have seen and we trust, who are, I guess, more established translators. We also work with them. But yeah, maybe Shelly, you can speak a little bit to how but when you have a piece of Chinese writing, and then how do you pair it with the right translator?
well, with some of our translators, like with, for example, Tian Tian, like she, because I've read so much of her work, and her translation, that I do have a slightly stronger grasp on her style. So there is some stylistic mechanisms behind the thinking, but largely I try to think about the text in terms of what it's like, um, what its English resonance has the potential to be. And with the younger translators, with the student translators, because they're new to the craft, so their voices are a little bit more malleable. And then so I try to give them texts that are a little less abstract. I try to, like, not a lot of really intense poetry, not a lot of really, really, sometimes when we publish essays, or when we publish a fiction, like Li Tang's like the end of the town at the end of the world is such a beautiful and such a complex text, but the language is really lyrical. And the language has a fluidity. So I thought that would be such a beautiful text to give to the student translators. And so there are these processes. It's not random, and I try to not let it get too random. But sometimes it's just like, well, we really want to publish this, and who's available to translate? Okay, it's this person. Then maybe it should be this person. Amor fati, love of fate. Like I do believe that and especially because like we edit all the translations, right? We finalize them and we perfect them in the end. So it's like I'm never worried that the translators will feel like that they have failed a text or that they're inadequate to translate a text. I don't ever am afraid of that. I think our translators have proved themselves so capable and so diligent. The only problems that I have had with this process is when the tempers get misaligned. We're all kind of a fiery, temperamental group, and translators.
Do tell.
No, I can't get into it again.
Well,
I think just to say, I think that people they take it for granted the intense machinery that is ticking away behind the face of all this, with the translation, because the mission itself is very compelling, because you have these excellent Chinese writers from all over China, and all of them have had different lives and they have different skills and different accolades, and they're all imagining the world that they come from in possibly the most authentic way. And then what you're doing is you're applying these tools to be able to make that clearer to a Western audience. So in that kind of simple way, that's actually very compelling to people if you were going to sell it to them. But it's also good to remember the sort of fine tuning that goes behind that. And I think you make a really good point about how organic translation in a way needs to be, but also the concessions you need to make, because there is a kind of process structure that you've created. And also something that Simon mentioned too, which I found really interesting, that resonated with me. And I won't jump to say it's specific to China, but I had a similar feeling. It's like being able to innovate in a way to access like different departments and use them for Spittoon. So, for example, Simon fostered this creation with Duke Wan Chan and found these student translators originally, brought them into the fold. And it reminds me as well of like how we found the apparatus to actually construct the magazine. Originally, I was working in marketing for a localization company in Beijing, and we decided to go use the printer that they used to print the first issue. And the designer in the marketing office was the designer who designed the first issue.
Paulo.
So it was almost as if the tools were all there. Yeah, Paolo, that's right. So we could pick up these tools and use them and like build this kind of like Mad Max machine. And that I think that's something that's worth noticing, the kind of freedom to create in those environments. Because to finish my point, it's like, in a way, you're illuminating people outside of China, outside of the East and in the West, about what it's like in China. And I think that people in the West have a preconception of what it's like in China. They've never visited, but to know that freedom existed there, and how willing so many people were to contribute to the machine that we created from scratch, is something worth mentioning. And another thing I have to notice is the impressive zeal that both of you have for the art, for the craft, and for translation. So how does that translate now? I know that Shelly, you are currently in Iceland, but you reside in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, I live on Vancouver Island.
Right. So I'll ask each of you individually, how does your drive and zeal for this project translate to your immediate location in the West, in North America? Like, is there any interest that you've been getting from institutions or friends? Maybe you could tell me something about that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody I talk to here is really curious and interested. and yeah, even some poets that I've reached out to and said, hey, I do this thing, and they said, oh yeah, I know this publisher, that editor that's really interested in publishing Chinese writing. So the interest here is enormous. I think that um, it's just a matter of making the Spittoon brand a little bit more recognizable here. But I think it's something that will really catch on, and is catching on.
Yeah, I think that, like, yeah, recently we made the decision to take our back issues online, which had Simon had always been a huge proponent of, and Sophie and I have always been like, oh, like I don't like no, like we love paper, like we want paper, like we want we want black ink on white paper. Like we had always kind of resisted that move, that digitalization move because, you know, we get so attached to this idea of the physicality of the text. Which now I see that we have now that we have taken on the magazine online, I see was kind of just maybe just a beautiful dream that Sophie and I deluded ourselves with, because taking the magazine online, I think, has been a wonderful step for us. And it has really, really helped, like, you know, it has helped me, like, yeah, like Simon said, when I talk to people about this work that I'm doing with Spittoon and how vital and I think it is, and I get so excited, and then it's hard, you know, I don't have the magazine on hand to show them, to be like, this is what we're doing, isn't it amazing, and we're doing everything, and like, look at all these amazing people we've published, and look at all these incredible texts that now exist in the world because of my colleagues. Um and now, yeah, now that we have the website, it's definitely such an aid to us, I think. And it's also helped us think a lot bigger about what the future of Spittoon could look like. I don't think Sophie and I will ever give up the print magazine. You're gonna have to wrench it out of our cold, dead hands. But definitely the online edition is such a such a powerful tool. And I do have hopes, and we do have plans to make it work for us, and to make Spittoon accessible, to make the content accessible, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're doing. We're trying to make things, we're trying to facilitate a doorway.
Yeah, before Shelly made the website, we were kind of like we were like, oh, how do we, ship magazines to the U.S. from China and Canada? And it was expensive, and like who's going to sell these magazines, and how are we going to get them to send money back to China for the profit that it was just. So anyway, having this website, which Shelley did such a beautiful job making, is going to be huge for Spittoon. We haven't even really started to take advantage of it in ways. I think full advantage of having the website. I think we can, even do more with it in terms of promoting the content. But yeah, I think it's a great. I feel like Spittoon magazine is coming into a second life. It's been reincarnated in this digital space, and I think it's going to get a lot more readers because of it.
Yes, there's a kind of rites of passage there, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. And even when I talk to like Chinese language sorry, Chinese translators who I've never worked with on Spittoon before, but who I know on another basis entirely. And when I mention Spittoon, it's like you kind of realize that there is this reach that the community has had, like with people who are doing like Chinese students who are doing like MFAs in the US and stuff. Like they talk about Spittoon, and they don't only talk about the magazine, but they talk about the Beijing community. And it has a wide reach, and having the magazine participate in strengthening the whole identity of what Chinese the Chinese diaspora is doing is also really powerful and a huge potential for us, I think.
Excellent. Yeah. Um, I can't help but remember the absolute trial of trying to shift stock in China. Once we got the print run out, we'd probably get, I don't know, maybe 2,000-3,000 mags. No, it wasn't. Sorry, 500 mags. 2,000-3,000. Good Lord, we'd be swimming in magazines if we did that. But we had around about 500, and one insight that we kept having at that time is that us poets are very good at creating, but not necessarily as good at distributing, marketing, and selling, right? So you've got the hard copies there, and they're all in like different people's houses, and they're all in venues, and the whole sort of like administration Excel spreadsheet side of it was really something that was difficult to wrap up. And I feel like this online solution is doing a good job, right? In terms of, distribution, marketing, it's all very self-contained. It's on the website. And maybe kids nowadays, maybe the next generations, because unfortunately we are aging, maybe they are just far more computer literate. And this is going to feel like it makes a lot more sense to them, to access the Spittoon website and see the latest updates, and maybe see like really compelling micro content that's mined from the magazines themselves, right? Because what you've got there is a central bank of like wonderful literature and poetry that could turn into all kinds of things through the marketing of that too. So I think this is a really good segue into asking you what you would like the future of the magazine to look like. I'll address Simon first, and just feel free to wax lyrical, both of you. Where do you want it to be in the next few years? Simon.
I'm just thinking of how we started in, working with Paulo. You made me think about Paulo. I had forgotten about Paulo, but yeah, me, Matt, and Paulo would be like crouched in a cafe at like 10 p.m., a few nights before the release party, and we had promised all these people we'd have a magazine for them, and Paulo would be there like, working away. He was so great. And then that one time when the printer didn't send the magazines in time for the release party, I can't remember if you were there for that, Shelly. Were you there for that?
Yeah.
That was bad. So we held a release party, and there was no magazines to show for it, and people were fine. I mean, they seemed fine with it. If they had complaints, they didn't complain to me. Anyway, I think we've come so far. And then, yeah.
Well, they were drinking, like they were partying.
Yeah. Shelly had like come here from Tokyo, and I was like, sorry, the printer like messed up. And then Shelly, do you remember the one time when the designer pulled out halfway through and you had to design the whole issue like in a few days?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I cried. But she still, you know what? I'm still so grateful to her because she still gave us such a beautiful cover.
I'm not.
Why did you do it, Shelley? Why did you do it? Why did you put so much work in? What inspired you?
I love the work. For me, it's not even about not doing it. I have to do it. If I didn't do it, no one would do it. I'm gonna do it, so I just do it. And like I said, for me, it's not even. Yeah, I mean, it's labor for sure. It's work, and it's hard work, and it took me a lot of time to, especially like learning InDesign. I was like crying, but I'm devoted to it. But Simon, please continue. Don't tell any more horror stories. I don't want to be re-traumatized.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking like my pitch to people about Spittoon is always China-U.S. relations are really strained right now. So Spittoon shows people the human side of China that you don't see in the New York Times. But yeah, it's really true. Like I was talking to not the U.S. ambassador, but the second to the U.S. ambassador in June, and he was like, "Do you do?" I told him I did Spittoon, and he was like, "I read Spittoon all the time," and I was like, "Wow." So you have these like extremely consequential people in the U.S.-China relationship who are engaging with what we put together, and that, for me, that was huge. But yeah, where do I want to see Spittoon? I mean, I look at publications like Asymptote, which Shelley's also worked on. These publications that Anglophone readers look to see what's happening in terms of the rest of the world in literature. And I would love for Spittoon to be something like that. Something that people go to, not just to read like Chinese literature, but just to read really good writing, and to read like a really beautiful publication. Like there's like a very few um, literary magazines that I read, and the reason, because there's like so many, it's hard to keep track. But the reason I read them is because they're consistently publishing really good writing, and because they're aesthetically beautiful. And Spittoon, I think, has both of those. Um, and I don't know if Spittoon gets enough attention for its design. I think the design is incredible. The design of the website is it's something I want to open up on my iPad on a Saturday morning and just scroll through. It's so seamless, and the colors and the art and everything is just so beautiful. So anyway, I wanted to, yeah, like any literary magazine, I want it to be something that people go to read great literature, not just another literary magazine who's there because they know they're going to get a bunch of submissions every time they call for them, but a literary magazine that's really serving a purpose, and that's one of a kind.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I completely agree with everything that Simon said. And yeah, and I do take a lot of pride in making such a like in participating and in helping to make such a beautiful product, and that yeah, the text not only that has such wonderful text, but also yeah, it's so I think like we all work so hard to make it pleasing. And yeah, and I think like we get so jaded about lit mags as writers because there's 7 billion of them, and most of them are ego. Like most of them are based on writers wanting to get published, and charging certain submission fees, making a little bit of money, and then like putting the work out just so that writers can see themselves in work. I mean, I know so many literature magazines, and this is like not even shade, this is just fact, but that like they only exist and writers only buy them once if their own work is in them. And they never look back on it once they've been published there. It's and I think so it's really easy to get cynical about this whole infrastructure, which I think is just really depressing, especially when you are a writer and you're trying to get published and your work really matters to you, and and yeah, it's just yeah. But so I think Spittoon has never been about ego. It's always been about generosity from every single person who's worked on it, from the writers who are lovely enough to give us their work, eminent writers who trust us even though we're small and we're independent and we're fucking punk about it, and yeah, and our translators whose labor is just immense, and yeah, and our editors and everybody who's worked on it. It's never once been about ego, and has never ever once been about making money. Um, and I'm really
Yeah.
yeah, the money thing though, I'm like we're maybe we try to change that in the future. Not making money like fucking like and not making billions of dollars, but we are looking towards a more structured form of funding, just so that we can pay people for their work, and we can be generous about
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to pay translators because and writers as well, but translators especially because we ask them to translate work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, and we're asking a lot out of them. Translation is it's a nose to the grindstone. Is that a term? Something you put something against a grindstone, right? And then you grind it.
Nose to the grindstone sounds painful.
Yeah. Anyway,
Sharpen your nose.
it is painful. That's exactly what I'm trying to illustrate. Is that it's painful. And if you've done it, I'm sure these words resonate with you. Pain.
Yeah, just to jump in there a little bit, based on what you both said, I think it's amazing that we have done as much as we have without funding. Just to bring together the pieces of the jigsaw, Simon, you mentioned that the immediate staff of the ambassador, the American ambassador to China, had read a member of the immediate staff had read Spittoon before and knew what Spittoon was. We have, bright lights that, like yourself and Shelly, who are working. Myself as well as the founder, been there since the beginning, never been paid. In fact, have spent a lot of money on the project, just like many of us have. So bringing that all together, there's a kind of Project Mayhem feeling to it, isn't there? There's a bit of a Fight Club vibe. It's like, you've got Simon speaking to this person who you wouldn't even know was affiliated. Yeah, I've read Spittoon, and you got these guys. Yeah, we work with Spittoon. It's like, what is it about Spittoon that has brought these people together? And brass tacks, serious question: would monetizing it damage that anarchic punk rock element that you guys are talking about? Is it necessary? It's absolutely necessary to monetize the magazine, right? Because you need to pay the writers, or
I've always, I guess, I've always been of the mind that monetizing, when you start paying people for the work that they used to do for free because they were just passionate about it, the relationship changes. And it's not that I'm not saying that people should just do things because they're passionate about them, but the whole thing would have to change. And I think it would be a positive change to start paying Shelly and Sophie and all our translators to do the work that they do, but it would fundamentally change their relationship to their work and what we are. So up till now, we've just been running on passion and rainbows and literature, and that's been great. And maybe one day we'll come across a structure that works for us where we can finally pay people. But honestly, right now, I don't see that happening, and I don't think it's fully necessary. It would be nice to have some change to pay writers, but yeah, there's different ways. Magazines can fundraise and can spend money, and many different models. But yeah, I don't think Spittoon will ever be like a poetry magazine that has a paid staff of editors and all that stuff, and it's funded by big farm, all that stuff. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, no, I think Simon is absolutely right. We will never be incorporated. And what you asked us, Matthew, is that do you think that like a cash flow would impede upon our whole punky rhythm that we have going on? And I think yes, absolutely it would. It would, when you attach a number to something, that is it seems like a legitimate value, but I actually think it abstracts the whole process. Like when you say, oh, I'm going to pay you $100 for this translation piece, it's like it forces them to compartmentalize it within the scheme of that value instead of the larger and I think greater values of the work. And I go back and forth on this all the time, which is like should I be seeking more money like for like my work, or like I think all writers do. Should I be trying really really hard to like to only take on paid roles and to only write things if I'm paid for them? And I remember I read this like tweet by this quite a famous author who came up in the last like 10 years or so. I won't mention his name. But I think he said something along the lines. It's like, I cannot believe that I'm doing work now and I used to get paid $200 or $300 for it. And now I'm just realizing that I should have gotten paid $2,000 or $3,000. And to me, I just found that such a flawed logic. Like, no, I do really think that people should be paid, yes, but I also think that money and the system of capital is a contaminant, and it's an inevitable contaminant. And I realize that I'm speaking from such a position of privilege when I say that I am even able to work for free, like to do anything for free. Like it's so lucky that I can sit here, concentrate my energy into something that's not going to bring me food or shelter or something like that. It's an immense blessing, and I always work in adjacent to understanding that, or try to. But I think, the work that we're doing with Spittoon is so much about activism. Um, it's it's so much about that kind of idea that you're going to give something and you're not going to see it come back to you in the form of numbers. You're going to see it come back to you. You're never going to see it come back to you because it's going out into the world. It's going out and spreading itself in the world, and it's doing things out there. And to me, that's important. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I could also say to the contrary about why people should get paid, and we should get funding, and everybody should get paid, and we should all quit our actual jobs and just focus on Spittoon and make a livable salary from that. Just that, like, I could say things in favor of that as well, and I think that's really important. But what I think we do with Spittoon is not that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that art and that that art is a gift, and you cannot remunerate or recompensate a gift, right? A gift is by definition excessive, and I think that art should always be that way. And for me personally, like I write poems, and I would never want to be in a position where I'm under contract to write poems for money that I need. Poetry has always been not my hobby, but the thing I do outside of work, right? I have labor, which is calculated by exchange, and I have poetry, which I kind of consider as a gift. And it's a gift to me, and it's a gift to the people who read it. But that's what I think of Spittoon as. It's this invaluable resource. It's this cultural artifact, and we've done fundraising campaigns where people have, given money to Spittoon. But what they're doing is they're not expecting exchange. It's a gift for a gift, and I think that's the beautiful thing about Spittoon.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I appreciate that from both of you. I think you're both correct. I think in this world that we're in, we're surrounded by distractions, and we're surrounded by a need to want to perform or make money or excel. And what we've provided, at least in China and now hopefully outside of China, is a chance for people to take part in a community where the stakes on the table were simply respect and people's ears and attention. And one thing that's always blown me away is how much people are willing to give when those are the stakes. When it's not monetized, where everybody is on a level pegging, and you get status in the community based on how much work you want to put in. And that's always been the inspiration for me. And that's partly the reason why I ask you this question. And I really appreciate your time today as well. I think that we've covered a lot of ground for the first ever Spittoon Arts Collective podcast. I was umming and ahhing a bit today, but thank you very much, guys. You handled it with characteristic grace and skill. I'm going to ask you some quick questions to finish today. And I want you to just answer from the bottom of your heart, first thing that comes to your head. Simon, what is the... Yeah, so I'll shoot Simon first, and I'll shoot Shelly second. Okay. Simon, what is the crisis of poetry today?
The crisis of poetry today is that too many people have too many opinions about what poetry should and should not be about. I think everybody's trying to say, oh, you can't write poems about that. You should write poems about that. But who cares? Poetry should be about enjoying, writing and enjoying reading. That's the crisis of poetry today. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. As they say on Twitter.
Shelly, same question. What's the crisis?
I'm having a crisis trying to answer this question. I'm the crisis of poetry. I think, okay, I'm just going to talk. So basically, I think it's too spread out. I think poets are not reading each other enough and not understanding each other enough. I think poetry is starting to become less about adding to the craft and adding to the lineage of poetry, and more about getting MFAs and publishing books.
Interesting.
Okay, I honestly don't even know what I'm saying. I'm literally panicking. But I this is something that I this is lightning round, right? So I don't want to elaborate.
That's great. No, that's a great answer. Please elaborate if you want.
No, I think that poetry has always been something that people instinctually reach for when they seek something beyond whatever there is. It's the poeticism is the baseline of everything, of every form of creation. When we see something beautiful, we call it a poetic. There's a reason for that. And we've built this there's this great big poetic tradition. And I think that people forget that every time you add to it, you're building on top of that. And that you're building on top of everybody writing before you and everybody who will write, and you're writing for everybody who will write after you. I think that line of communication has become increasingly fragmented with the age of the internet, and poems being kind of more of more forced into infrastructures than they, I think, should be. Unless, I don't know.
What do you think about Rupi Kaur?
Oh my God, I don't even, yes, Rupi Kaur is the crisis of poetry today. I don't even want to talk about her. I don't even want to put her in the same sentence as poetry. I don't think she writes poems. I think she writes fortune cookies.
Which came first, Instagram or Rupi Kaur?
Good question.
Wow. That was a great answer. It's exactly what I'm looking for. I've got one more and then I'm going to let you go. All right. Now, I'll start with Simon and then Shelly, just like before. Simon, you get to take a poet onto a desert island to live together in eternity. But it's not the poet's work, it's the poet. Right? So he has to be chill or she has to be chill, right? And they could be dead. But you have to live with them, right? So you have to mediate between how you like their work and what you think their personality is like. So who do you choose? And why?
Okay. If I had more time to think about this, I might have a different answer. But off the top of my head, Emily Dickinson. Because she would just stay to herself, not bother me. I feel like we're similar personalities. She's kind of a cat. I'm kind of a cat. And we could just write poems together on the island and just be cool with each other and read each other's poems and workshop and stuff. And, we'd probably die of starvation in about 2 days, but at least we wouldn't bother each other.
And eventually, I suppose, one would eat the other's face, right? It's depends who dies first. Right. Okay, so excellent answer. Shelly, same to you. Which poet would you take to a desert island, the poet themselves?
Wait, I have a follow-up question. So you said we lived there for eternity, so survival skills are not a part of this. They're not, right? So we would just live.
Excellent. Wait, no. They somehow they are a part of it. You live there for eternity, but you live there in sequential lifespans, and you're trying to maintain those lifespans and not live in poverty and destitution, right? So it's the same it's Groundhog Day. It's Groundhog Day on an island with a poet. So survival skills are definitely necessary.
So we would need to eat at least one meal a day and find fresh water and stuff, right?
Yeah, you'd feel hungry. You'd like the urge to drink water. It's all there.
Okay, then I would choose Gary Snyder because he's a
Ooh.
he's a wilderness survival. But I also have an addendum, which is that if wilderness survival wasn't a part of the game, then I would choose Frank O'Hara.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. So it's like either cocktails or survivalism, right? Sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, like I want to talk about. I'm not like Simon. I need to talk. Like I need to talk, and I need someone to talk back once in a while, at least.
I can imagine Shelly and Frank gossiping about Rupi or talking shit about Rupi Kaur and other Instagram poets on an island together.
Oh
They'd
my
forget
God.
to eat.
He would be livid.
Definitely.
I'm so glad he's dead just because he would never have to know what Rupi Kaur is.
Yeah. He's resting in peace.
So now I know what the sort of like hell version of this island would be. It would be you and Rupi Kaur together for eternity. Right? Good. Writing poems about the beach and writing them in the sand with a stick. So that brings us to the end of the first episode of the Spittoon Arts Collective podcast. Simon and Shelly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any final words for me, anybody? Is there anything you want to say or?
I just want to say that please, if you can, support the magazine just by reading or just by reaching out and giving some words of encouragement if you want, or if you are ever wanting to work with us, we would love to have you. And we're always on the lookout for talented translators or talented accountants or talented mark PR people. I don't know. We're always looking, and yeah, just please keep a lookout for us. Follow us on social media, and enjoy the fruits of our labor.
Excellent. Simon, last words?
Yeah, I echo that. Who wouldn't want to work with us? But the caveat is that you have to do it on a desert island.
Yeah. We don't have enough money to pay anybody, but we have enough money to buy an island and desert it.
So, yeah, that's Spittoon litmag.com. The Litmag shares a Twitter account with the collective, which is at SpittoonC. If you want to contact the Litmag team by email, do you guys have a dedicated Litmag email? Or is it just your collective emails?
There's a contact page on the website.
It's all there.
Yeah, you can write us through the website, and yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, guys, you take care. Best of luck, and see you next time.